Hello, everyone. You're most welcome. Thank you for being patient with that slight delay. You're most welcome to the second session of day 3 of the Afro Champions Bomber. And we've just had a fantastic conversation on reinventing African storytelling from the entrepreneurship perspective. And now I'm so excited to have you all here, and I'm looking forward to another exciting conversation. A warm welcome to also those who are joining us from across the world and the different social media platforms. We welcome you to, settle in and send in your questions throughout the session. We are delighted to have you. You're most welcome to our moderator, Moki Makura, who will be speaking to us from South Africa. And yeah, I'm just excited to do this. My name is Natasha Muhoza. I'm speaking to you from Nairobi. I'd like to just go through a few house rules. To our panelists, I'd like to request you to please keep your audio on mute as much as possible, and we will get to you whenever it's yours. When you have the floor to speak, you just unmute yourself, please. And then also, please kindly try to speak within the time limits allocated to you. We have 2 more sessions, and they're running back to back today. So we'll ask, I'm sure our moderator is ready to be quite strict with timing. To our attendees, just make sure you utilize the chat and the Q&A icons on your screen to send in your questions. We will sort through them and make sure as many of them get answered. So finally, let's just have some fun. I'd also like you to realize that we have French interpretation available. Unfortunately, that's the only other language we have, but I'm sure you'll be okay with that. And that is the other person reflected on your screen. Well, over to you, Moki, and thank you.
Hey, thank you and very much, Natasha, and welcome everybody to this second session on reinventing the African story. So the difference between that one that you just saw and this one is that the other one was focused on entrepreneurship, and this time we're more focused on the actual talent. So in this discussion, we are going to be speaking to a commodity that Africa certainly has not a lack of, and that is talent. So I hope you've all had a chance to have a good Sunday lunch and you're ready to kick back and listen to the personal stories of our panel today. So I want to thank you for joining us, because I know there are many other options for a Sunday afternoon. So we appreciate you being with us. And as Natasha said, my name is Moki Makura and I'm joining you from South Africa. So let me start with an African proverb, because of course there is an African proverb for most situations, but this one is one of my personal favorites, and this is it. Until lions learn to write, hunters will tell their stories for them. It's a powerful proverb because for too long, we as Africans have allowed our stories to be told by other people, and we haven't actually done enough to share them with each other as Africans. So the story of Africa as a troubled continent, as a place that needs saving, where people lack agency to make change, is probably very familiar to most people. But as a result, how Africans are seen by others, and also how we see each other, is informed by stereotypical and very outdated stories. And in many cases, these narratives are negative and they don't entirely reflect our current reality, at least not my reality. So we know that stories are the most powerful way to put ideas into the world. So especially ideas about the Africa we want. So with the celebration of Integration Day and the launch of the African Continental Free Trade Area, we really need a genuinely connected Africa at all levels. So it's important we tell our stories to each other and that we share these stories so that they can represent who we are today and what we can be tomorrow. It's difficult to talk about African storytelling without quoting Chinua Achebe, and I think he was quoted in the last panel as well. But this particular quote is very short, it's very pertinent, and it's very simple. And it is this: if you don't like someone's story, write your own. So that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. We'll be hearing stories from Africa's talent, people in the creative and cultural industries, and those in the sports world. All talent who are working to shift these negative narratives and are headlining the stories through which people see the continent. So before I introduce my panel and my special guest, let me tell you how I'm going to do this panel, because there are quite a few speakers on. So first, we're going to hear from our two creative panelists, and they're on here already. And they're going to take us through a little bit of their personal journey and how they are sharing the African story through their work. Then we've got two special guests. I can see one of them already, Sir Martin Sorrell, and we've also got Benedict Oromo, who will be joining us. And they are here to sort of comment on the stories and also talk a little bit about investment in the creative sector and also branding Africa. Then we're going to focus and shift on to sporting talent and hear stories from two of Africa's sporting icons, and then we'll take questions from the audience. So a couple of quick updates before I start, changes to the panel. So due to unfortunate events in Ethiopia, which we all know, the internet has been shut down. So we're not going to be joined by Her Excellency Amira El Fadil, who's the Commissioner for Social Affairs. As you know, the shutdown affects a number of our colleagues who are based in Ethiopia, so none of them will be joining us. We also just got news that Didier Drogba will not be joining us due to a last-minute conflict. So apologies to the Chelsea fans. I have to confess, I have lost a lot of credibility with my 15-year-old Chelsea supporter son. So yeah, I have to deal with that. But we still have a great lineup, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So let's get started. Let me first of all start by welcoming my first two guests, and then I'm going to introduce my two special guests. That's Martin, when I ask them questions. So Adama, let me start with her. Adama Paris is the Senegalese fashion designer and entrepreneur who's known for creating Black Fashion Week, and that was to help promote the work of African designers and models. She has put African style on the global fashion calendar. She lives between Dakar, Paris, and New York. Adama, welcome. Our second storyteller and panelist is Vanya Leles. She's a high-end jewelry designer and gemologist. And for those of us who don't know what that is, and I have to confess, I had to Google it, gemology is the science of studying, cutting, and valuing precious stones. So that's something you've learned for today. So Vanya was born in Guinea-Bissau and was educated in Lisbon and now lives in London. And she's actually achieved what very few Africans have been able to achieve, and that's by being able to penetrate the high-end world of international jewelry design with her African-inspired jewelries. So let me start with you, Adama. You were the daughter of diplomats. You've lived in France, in Germany, in Italy. Annoyingly, you speak 5 languages. You studied fashion in Paris. You've got a successful global business that takes you to the fashion capitals of the world. Just tell us a little bit about this journey. When did this journey start? The way you know, the fact that you want to use fashion to change the way the world sees Africa. When did this journey start for you?
Actually, I study economics. I didn't study fashion. I study economics. I was a banker. I was a former banker. And
I'm sorry, gosh.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And I study fashion when I really wanted to get education about fashion, because I was an autodidact and it was nice and stuff. But I figured that I had to go and get education, because that's how I get here. But first of all, bonjour tout le monde, and I'm really pleased to be here. Bonjour, ma sœur guinéenne, and bonjour, sir. And so my passion, and I remember at 9 years old, my dad was a diplomat here in France, and my mother diplomat, was always invited in fashion shows, and we went to Monsieur Saint Laurent fashion show, and that's really when I when that did happen, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. From young age, from 9, I knew that I wanted to. I didn't want to be a doctor, not a banker, even though my father forced me to. So that's really my first love, encounter with fashion. And when I finished my study, because I had to deal with my dad to have a proper job, and when I finished my study and he stopped paying for me, I had to work for the bank, and I took courses of fashion, and I went back to Dakar. That's why I went back home, and I started my label, Adama Paris, and I started Dakar Fashion Week. That's what all started. It was I was 22.
Yeah. One of the things you said was that you dream of the day that we no longer need Black Fashion Week. And
Yeah.
when I can be in fashion shows in Paris and Hong Kong based on my talent and my financial capabilities. Tell me, what was the biggest challenge that you found in trying to sort of start something called Black Fashion Week, which by definition seems very exclusion, you know, it's not inclusive.
Actually, to me, was the opposite. And I was also très provocative because at that time, and now we can see it now with the Black movement coming back, it was just so frustrating not being able to talk about culture. And actually, when I started Black Fashion Week, it was about telling people our story about Black culture. It was never about color. It was never ever about color. It was like, and our slogan was like, this is about culture and a Black culture, and Black culture include African culture. So for me, it was more uh, white, and I wanted to, and also tell people that not all Black people were African, and not all African was Black. So, but the thing we share in common is that Black culture, and Black culture, you don't have to be Black to enjoy it, or you don't have to be African. So my journey started like that, and also at that time it was really disturbing to see all the Black model I was friend with not having the same chance as all the white models. For instance, you come to the casting and they were like, okay, we have our Black, and all the other Caucasian, if they want someone blonde or rousse, you can dye your hair, and but you black. And it was for me at that time, when I started thinking about it, I was 18. It was so not fair. So I decided to talk about Black culture, but to push more Black model in the platform, and doing it also in the beautiful Paris, and also in a beautiful place, Place Vendôme. And I remember people asking me to go to 18 because it was more for Black people. So in a way, through my years of telling my story as a Black woman, as an African woman, I always find really uh, disturbing, and sometimes even funny, how people always wanted to put me in a box, and telling that I was this was not this was anti-white, or this was anti something. I just wanted to show a culture that really close to my heart, and that's all. And
But
I remember that's when I started becoming an activist,
right.
because I never
So
thought that.
I'm going to come to you, Vanya, in a minute, but Adam, I just want to ask, what is the story that you're trying to tell through your business, through the fashion, through the designs? And we've talked a lot about Black, but is it African? Is it specifically African, an African culture, or is it a ubiquitous Black culture? What is the story you're trying to tell?
It's both. It's both because I am African, but I am Black, and living and being lucky to get education elsewhere than out in Africa, and living in this world that we were so different and yet together. I had the feeling, and it was really something I needed as a person to just talk about me, in that center of all these people, to talk about me, to talk about my journey, to talk about who I am as a Black and African woman. So it was always both, talking about Africa and talking about Black. And what I wanted to tell people were, and especially young women, because I went back to live in Dakar really, I think 22, and start Dakar Fashion Week 18 years ago. I just wanted to, and at that time, art and fashion was something so not relevant for our parents, our grandparents. It was like, okay, get a proper job. So I wanted to tell that story, that you can be an entrepreneur and an art entrepreneur. You can art matter, African art matter, and the Black art matter. So for instance, just example, I started a TV channel because the TV at that time, fashion TV, were not showing us. We would have
This was
paid
in Senegal, right?
yeah, we would have
Yeah.
paid 10,000 to have Fashion TV come to Dakar Fashion Week, and they will show us at 3 in the morning, only 2 minutes. So I was like, okay, I went to my bankers, like, I need a TV. He was like, no, you can't afford it. You're not rich. But everything I created during these 18 years was because I need them. And my story and who became our story was letting those girls know that you can do it.
Right.
If it's not there for you to use it, just create it. That was the story I wanted to put out there.
So Vanya, thank you, Adama. Vanya, let's hear from you, because your story is a little bit similar to Adama's in a way, because you're also using your platform to tell a story about Africa to try, and I assume, change perception. So you said you wanted to bring the voice of Africa to fine jewelry. So just tell me a little bit about your background, because you came from Guinea-Bissau, and you are, I don't know where you are right now, possibly sitting in your jewelry studio, which is on Bond Street in the heart of Mayfair. How did you get there?
Well, hi everybody. First of all, thank you so much for having me on a panel. I really appreciate it. And so, just to make a long story very short, I was born and raised in Guinea-Bissau, in Bissau. I come from a very humble family. So, and to be living the life I'm living today and working with what I'm working today is just like so foreign to me. It's astronomical, diamonds and jewelry, for what I experienced before I entered the industry and what I work with now, is not something I thought it was possible. So where do I begin? I finished primary school, secondary school. I went to Portugal. I did my high school and university. I actually lived in Paris for 18 months because I wanted to learn French. I didn't speak much French, and I had a lot of friends from Senegal who also spoke French, and I wanted to do that. And then after I went back to Lisbon, I could not find a proper job, and I decided, why don't I go to London, learn English 1 year, and then I came back, I'm sure I'm gonna have a job. So I came to London. I fell in love with London. I've been here for 20 years now. So long story short, I started modeling. The modeling took me to New York. That was 2002. I was doing this beautiful photo shoot where there was like this fine jewelry, diamonds, sparkling things, and and I was like, wow, I was so mesmerized. And I was like, this is amazing. And someone told me, how are you so surprised? All of these probably come from Africa, and you African, with my very thick African accent. I was like, really? I was like, so anyway, diamonds in it. So I remember leaving the studio that day. I said, I'm going to walk down on Fifth Avenue or go to the Diamond District. I will find some African jewelers, brands, or dealers who can tell me more about the industry, right? I was like, so I left the studio, walked down, up and down Fifth Avenue, went all these fine jewelry store. All I was remembering, it was like, they have brands that exist for 100 years, over 100 years, 160, 40 years, 50 years, and I didn't see any signs of African, knowing that 75% or more of what exists in fine jewelry comes from the continent. right? I went down to at the Diamond District Center, 47th Street. I said, okay, must be some African diamond dealers. Zero. So then and then I remember calling my mom. I said, Mom, do you know all these come from the continent and there's no representation? I want to have my fine jewelry brand. Mom turned to me like, whoa, why don't you give yourself 10 years, study the craft and go and work for other brands, and then you'll be able to realize why there is no representation on this side of the industry. Anyway, long story short, I decided to quit modeling. I enrolled myself at GIA. I studied gemology, diamonds, precious gemstones, design course and the business. And then I was set to learn the craft. I was very lucky to find a job, but I was very persistent. This industry is very close-knit. Outside the continent is very generational. Family work with family. They hire people look like them. They give them position to people that they know.
So how did you break through all of that? Because you're the wrong color, you don't have the
wrong
family lineage.
everything.
Yeah.
So basically, a lot of people I said I want to work. Even I remember my teacher GIA was like, "Are you sure? Because you're not gonna find anyone who's gonna give you that kind of job that you want." I was like, "Okay." So basically, I picked up one company that I wanted to work for, which was Graph Diamonds at the time in 2004-5. They were still small family-owned business, because if you work for family business, you learn a lot more than just working in a big corporation. You are given a task and that's your role. So I sent them about 15 times my CV. I was very persistent. I wasn't getting anywhere, no answer. So I printed my CV one day. I went to Mr. Graph headquarters. When I spotted Mr. Graph, at that point, I knew how they looked like, who they were. I spotted him 8:30 in the morning, going into his building. I said, like, Mr. Graph, my name is Vanya. This is my CV. I have no experience, but I learn really fast and I work hard. He took the envelope from my hand, went, after I sent 15 times my CV, it went inside. 3 days later, I got a phone call. I went for 2-3 interviews. I was given a job.
Fantastic.
I was the first to arrive, the last to leave, worked through my holidays, did everything that, from picking up coffee, photocopies, cleaning the window because someone put a fingerprint on the windows, the jewelry will have to be. So I practically worked, did everything inside.
And so you're a living testament that hard work pays off, because today you have a successful business. You're running your own diamond jewelry business. But one thing that I do want to ask you is that even though the products that you sell, the diamonds, I mean, you're very careful about where you source them, but you do not sell to the continent, right? Your market is not Africans.
Okay. Well, so the reason why I wanted to go, I will answer that in 1 second. The reason why I wanted to go into having my own brand, because after working for Graph, De Beers and Sotheby's, I realized, and I was going to all these fairs, JCK, all these diamond fairs, there's 3,000 exhibitors. Everybody will proudly advertise Canadian diamonds, Russian diamonds, Burma rubies, Colombian emeralds, but no one was advertising, let's say, African diamonds, Botswana diamonds, South African diamonds. There was no mention anywhere of African gemstones or Mozambican rubies, Zambian emeralds, knowing that those gemstones are in the market, but they proudly print the big display, all these diamonds. So I started asking questions, and they would look at me like, and remember my bosses at the time said, Vanya, don't ask these questions. I said, well, we all know 80% what is in this fair comes from the continent. Why there's only Russian diamonds, Canadian diamonds, Burma rubies? No one is talking about the gemstones coming from the continent. So this is when I decided to start my own company, because I work for all these companies. The relationship I built with the clients are not predominantly Africans. My biggest market is the Middle East, because I had some good clients I met along the way from the Middle East. So they trusted me and they like my designs and they buy. slowly, I think Africans are interested in supporting and buying from other Africans. So my clientele, African clientele is increasing because most of they want to forgo the big brands. You know, my jewelry is handmade in Italy because I don't have workshops, factories on the continent that can manufacture the jewelry. You know, the same hands that make all of the big brands jewelry makes mine, but my brand is Van Lelle's Diamonds, is not XYZ. So, but yet I'm hoping like slowly we will starting to tell my story, the narrative, you know, especially for the last few weeks, I was very strongly talking about all this was going on around the world. I lost a lot of my clients that were not African because they didn't think like I should be talking about other things. But that's okay. You know, I'm here to stay. I fought myself. I've been working so hard for 17 years in industry with my own brands for the last 7 years. So that's okay. But
well, congratulations on building the business. But let me bring in two of our sort of special guests. That's Martin and Professor Benedict Orama. But so we've heard from two creatives and two very bold women who've been taking on the challenge of ensuring Africa is represented in their field. So, you know, it'd be great for you to comment on their stories and talking about sort of investing into the creative industries, building brand Africa. So I want to hear from Martin, you first, and let me just quickly introduce you. Sir Martin Sorrell, excuse me, the highly respected and in some cases feared British businessman who's a founder of WPP, which is the world's largest advertising and PR group. He recently resigned there, well, actually 2 years ago, and has since started a new vehicle called S4, which has quickly started acquiring companies in the digital space. Thanks for joining us, Martin. Let me also just quickly bring in Professor Orama, who is the president of, Professor Benedict Orama, who's the president of Afrexim Bank, which is a multilateral financial institution whose highest priority is to support Africa's ambition to create an integrated market. So during his term, the bank has dispersed over $30 billion, half of which has been to support intra-Africa trade. In January this year, they caused quite a stir when they announced a $500 million fund to support the creative and cultural industries. And Professor Orama has just been reappointed to serve for a second 5-year term, so congratulations to him on that. But like I said, let me bring you in, Sir Martin, first, because, you know, what I guess for you, I don't know how much you talk about Africa in your business dealings, because I've sort of tried to look at what are your thoughts. I know you've had some business assets on the continent, but curious to know what are your thoughts about brand Africa, and just also the fact that these two, you know, brave entrepreneurs are building it, infusing it into their businesses. You're on mute if you're about to start talking, but just curious to comment on you about brand Africa and what your thoughts about it. Is it an asset or is it, you know, a negative asset?
Well, first, Moki, delighted to be here, and a big thank you to Brian Simons, who's, I think, listening. Maybe he'll participate as he invited me to join you. I mean, I don't want to be controversial, but here goes.
Please be controversial.
There isn't brand Africa, and that's the problem. You know, in the previous session, one of the speakers, which I thought was a great session too, one of the speakers said, you know, Africa is a continent, it's not a country. And that is the heart of the problem. And the reason that I was particularly interested when Bright said, come and speak to this, is that the biggest issue that I faced, WPP, for example, I mean, the answer to your question is we talk a lot about Africa, but it tends to be talk, not doing.
Right.
And everything that gets done, and these two very inspiring stories that we've heard from Adama and Vanya of what they've done in the fashion and jewelry business. But, you know, the interesting thing is that One of them's in France and one of them's in the UK. And what really needs to be done is to integrate the continent, if that is possible, because, you know, counting my experience. So when I was at WPP, I got really excited. This was probably about 8, 9, 10 years ago. Really excited about what I was starting to see from the big multinational corporations. A lot of them packaged goods companies. Some were in the drinks industry, but mainly in the packaged goods. And then, of course, telecommunications, huge expansion in telecommunications across the continent. And that was a prime driver of it. And I thought I saw great opportunities. So we started in East Africa. We had a strong business in South Africa. We had a good business in Egypt. But we really started to sort of motor, if I can put it that way, in East Africa. And the thing, and this is probably not what you want to hear, but let me say it, because I think it is the key. What bedevils Africa is there are big issues, big economic issues and financial issues around the obvious: corruption, political volatility. You know, there are so many atoms in the African continent, 55, 56, 57, whatever it is. There are so many atoms, molecules moving in different directions at various points in time. You know, it's just interesting that panelists can't be on this panel because of certain volatility or whatever it happens to be. So that's the issue. So what's really interesting about the two stories that we've heard today, which are very inspiring to everybody who's on this call and anybody who listens to anybody who talks about being on this call, and the fact that female entrepreneurs too is iconic. But this is the key. It is building stories like these at a micro level. I think, yeah, I welcome everything I read about BOMA, and particularly the project that was given to the two universities to talk about what they see as the vision for Africa in 2063, or where it goes out to, and the 4 sort of criteria that they establish, whether it be common currency, standing army or whatever, president and parliament, whatever, it's bringing it together. Because it was interesting, I had another panel yesterday on CNBC, and again, a very powerful example story. Woman, investor, had been an entrepreneur, but then turned investor. And what she is doing in the context of Africa is also, I think, what needs to be done. It needs to be done at the grassroots. And there are things going on in relation to technology, and you've discussed it in this session already and in the previous session, the sort of things that are going on from a technological point of view, whether you call it the 4th Industrial Revolution or whatever the devil you call it, are going to help build stories of this nature at the grassroots level. But the answer to your question at its heart is, I think it's very difficult to get agreement as to what brand Africa constitutes. You know, there are certain objectives we could agree on. There are certain values we could agree on. But I think to promote it in that way, I think the technology will drive this at the grassroots. And that on the basis of my experience, trying to do it at a macro level is extremely difficult. And what needs to happen is there has to be revolutionary activist activity, economic activity at the grassroots level. So the sort of stories you just heard, the two that we've just heard, you magnify that all the time. So capital, you look for venture capital, you look for private equity, you look for banking capital, as my co-panelists no doubt will talk about in a minute, and start to bring it together at the top level. But really to think about Brand Africa, I think is just, it's so difficult even at a country level to get presidents and prime ministers to think about an integrated communications program at a country level, let alone try to do it at 55, 56. I think countries, I think it's virtually, I'm going to say this, and again, it's not what you want to hear. I think it's virtually impossible. So this is a grassroots
on
revolution.
That positive note, so Martin, on that positive note, thank you for the positivity. I'm going to move on to Professor Benedict, because I want to talk a little bit about that fund that you launched, which was for the creative industries, because you launched it at a really sad time because then COVID came, but it's $500 million US. I don't know how much of it has been dispersed, but I'm just curious, you know, and most people I think on the call, if they're in the sector, want to know, how do creatives get access to this money? What is it you're looking for? What do you want to invest in? You're on mute, by the way.
I'm muted now. Are you hearing me?
We are hearing you loud and clear.
All right, thank you, Moki. And let me thank the Afro Champions Initiative and the African Union for putting this great event together. And let me also thank Adama and Vania and our friend from the WPP too for their interventions. I think Adama and Vania have been very inspirational. Their life stories are inspirational. They teach us quite a few things. First, I think, is the values that we need and the youth need to be able to succeed in this highly competitive marketplace for the creatives. But beyond that, they also tell us about the challenges and also about the missed opportunities that we must now grab if we hope to use the creative industry to begin to change our continent. And when I say this, I do not look at it only from the point of view of the commercial aspects, which is obvious, and I'll come to that when I discuss the fund. I would also talk about it, see it from the liberation that we are all fighting for. I think Adama talked about it, Vania talked about it in a different way. You see, Bob Marley said, sang a song, "Emancipate from mental slavery, none but yourself can free our minds."
A singing CEO, wow.
Yeah, he said this, and it's true. We have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. There is no group of people that have been that have suffered the greatest violence than the Africans. Going back from the slave trade to the colonialism, I mean, the greatest violence to their culture. So we, now with independence, we had almost 50 years ago, depending on the country, we have to do something about it. And it's the creative industry that has to do something about it. You said something when you started. We have to tell our own story. We shouldn't blame anybody now. And unless we tell our own story, our children and our grandchildren would then adopt a culture that would then make our own history to disappear. That rich history that is actually an asset. If you look at the creative industry, you have more than $3 trillion in global revenues. What does Africa get? Less than 2% of it. We say we are suffering from unemployment, plus more than 30 million people. Africans employed in it, less than 2 million people. And this is a
why
continent.
is that, Professor Benedict? Why
And that is
is
what
that?
I'm coming to. It's a continent that is rich. You see, every time in everything, when you discuss Africa, everybody says it's a continent with potential, a continent with potential. We're tired of potential. We need to realize that potential. Because the lady who was talking from University of Strathclyde or something, or Strathmore, was talking about the storytelling in Africa. That is it. That is there. If we don't allow it to die, it's a huge asset. We have all the designers, we have singers, we have everything, which we're beginning to see now. But we have to see how to convert this into real assets that create money that we put in our pockets. And that is why our Flexing Bank has decided. Yeah, that's why, well, without much support, people like Adama, people like Vanya have started doing that. And we have so many like that in across our continent. But our Flexing Bank had decided to come and do something also. And that is why we have now a Creative Africa strategy. And that Creative Africa strategy is a holistic strategy. It's intended to deal with some of the things, some of the challenges that we just had from these two young ladies that spoke today. We deal with the issue of market access. We have to commercialize what we have. We have to turn them into real assets. We have to do that by creating a platform for education. We have to create a platform for market access. We have to create a platform for industrializing it, making sure that what we sell are produced. Vanya said that she produces in Italy. We want her to produce in Africa. I know we had some discussions with her about that subject matter. So this is what we are doing, and that's why we created that $500 million facility, and we are right. Just after we created it, COVID-19 came. But I can assure you that we have not been sitting on our palms. We've made disbursements to Malawi, to Nigeria. There are transactions under consideration, even in Botswana, and so on. So the transactions that are being brought to us are being processed. Okay, some of the things we wanted to do to make sure we make it more easily accessible, as say constrained by COVID, but we are still making sure we do something so that everybody gets it. I'll give you one example. You see, if you go to the music and the film industry in Africa, you see that many of the actors there are very small. They're very atomistic. So difficult for banks to finance them. No wonder the venture capital funds that come to Africa, none of them gets any funding. So what you are doing now is that you are creating a cooperative framework so that these small entities can form cooperatives. So when they then form cooperatives, they will then become bankable and people can then support them. And within that cooperative, they will now become their own brothers and sisters keepers. Making sure they continue to get money, making sure that they behave responsibly, and that becomes a platform for them to grow. And within us as a Flexing Bank, we are also doing things. We have said to build, and we already started doing that, a museum of African trade and trade finance within our bank, and also an art gallery. And with discussions with the Afro champions and the AU about having an artist in residence program there. Because we believe that these are the ways where we can begin to preserve our story. These are the ways we can tell others. There are about 600 banks in Africa. Assuming everybody does that, we're going to give people, artists, somewhere to exhibit, things to show. We are going to make our children to go and see things about their history they do not see today. So that is what we are doing, and I believe that by doing all that, we'll begin to make sure that those who come after Adama and Vanya will not go through the kind of challenges they went through to achieve the success they've made of themselves today.
Right. Thank you, Professor Benedict. And I do have to commend you and the bank for that fund, because it's one of the few interventions into the creative and cultural industries that's actually really trying to shift the sector. So we've talked a little bit about the creative and cultural sector. We've heard from Sir Martin, we've heard from you, Professor Benedict, and also from Vanya and from Adama. So we want to move on to the sporting talent. And African sports personalities have raised the profile of the continent by excelling essentially at their sport. And through that, they've been able to shine a light on the continent and the countries they're from. So football and basketball are probably the two most African-dominated sports. We all remember the French World Cup team, which was quite heavily African. But there's also a growing number of African descent players, or players of African descent, in the US NBA League, and the sport's moving to the continent in a big way with the launch of the Basketball Africa League. And I believe there's going to be a league of about 12 teams from 9 different African countries who will be playing in this new African League. So we are going to be talking to some sporting talent, and both of them are retired sporting talent. And I'm going to introduce our two panelists now who are with us. We have basketball great Dikembe Mutombo from the DRC, who is a legend both on and off the court. He is one of the top post defenders of all time. And I'm sure that sentence means something to somebody, because doesn't mean a lot to me, but it means that he's very, very good. And he's played an important role in growing the sport on the continent, particularly the stuff that he's doing with this Basketball Africa League. He is also a philanthropist and a humanitarian, and he supports many, many causes. I mean, his foundation has built a $29 million hospital in Kinshasa, which he named after his mother. So welcome, Dikembe. We also have another player, and his name is Lowell Deng, who's also with us. Now, Lowell recently retired. I think he retired last month after a 15-year career in the game. He spent much of his career at the Chicago Bulls, and Deng is a 2-time NBA All-Star, and even I know what that means. He also has a foundation that works in Africa and in the US, through which he is giving back to the continent. He's also the Basketball Federation president for South Sudan, so he remains very connected to his country of birth. And I believe that it is the anniversary, so it's South Sudan's Independence Day, which is coming up on July the 9th, and he's quite connected to the country, so it is a celebration. So I just want to make sure we get that out there. So let me start with you, Dikembe, because I can see you're there. You sort of went to the US on an academic scholarship to become a medical doctor, and you got sidetracked by basketball. So I just would love to hear a little bit about how the game changed your life and your plans.
Oh, thank you for hosting me. I'm very happy to be in this panel today, even though it's a little bit early in the morning here in America.
Which state are you in? Where are you? Are you East Coast, West Coast?
I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
So I want to thank all the panelists who came before me for their contribution to the continent. All we are trying to do right now, we're just trying to invest. The game have changed me. The game helped me, not just to become Dikembe Mutombo that I am today, but they helped me change the living condition of my people in African continent as well, and to give the new hope for the next generation that are coming up, that there is a bright future for our continent, that our continent is full for not just natural resources, also human resources that can produce a lot and that can make a change in this world.
So Dikembe, can I just ask you, because it feels like if you are good at sport, you're a footballer or you're a basketball player, your dream is to get to America or get to Europe and play for one of the foreign teams. Is there an African dream, and should there be an African dream for sports people on the continent?
There's an African dream for so many young Africans. As I'm talking to you today, the NBA just have launched the new basketball league that's supposed to start in March. not because of this COVID pandemic, we could have been having a large game, be playing in the continent. Our goal for so many years, for the last 20 years, is to find a way that we can drive our young people from the continent to be able to perform on their best ability and to stay in the continent and make money. And then we have reached brain. Now, we just have to go and put it in practice. There's so much hope in the young people that who don't want to leave the continent, who don't want to go to America, who don't want to go to Europe, but they want to stay home, becoming the product of the continent and lead the next generation. And then we are trying to do our best to make sure that they fulfill their dream. And I think NBA, with the help of our NBA Africa, Amadou Fall, I think that thing is going to happen.
Well, I certainly hope so, because at least it gives them opportunity to play and become professional on the continent. And I'm going to come back to sort of funding of sports. But I want to bring you in, Luol Deng, because your early story, in a way, kind of feeds the African narrative. And, you know, just so you know, I Googled you looking for articles, and I saw a story on you, and the headline for it was Luol Deng, from a war refugee to NBA success story. It was that rags to riches story. That it's almost it's the story of every African that makes it. That you've got to have come from you know, war-torn country. You have to have fled across, you know, the continent to get to Europe to your salvation. So I'm just curious, and it's not an easy question to start with. Is that how you tell your story? Is there a different narrative that you want when people, you know, read your story?
Yeah. First of all, thanks for having me in this panel. It's really amazing to listen to everyone give their input, and I'm very passionate about our continent. So love hearing so much with what everybody is saying. To answer your question, I think you know, it's not just me. I think just for all of us Africans, for the longest, our story has been told for us, and I think. Now it's starting, you know, it caught up for years, but now we have voices and platforms where we are actually speaking out. I think for me, the story is I did, you know, because of what was going on in South Sudan, or Sudan at the time, we fled the country for a better life. And I ended up, you know, like Dikembe said, basketball has given us so much that I had an opportunity where I could actually go out and see what my talent could get me. But in terms of storytelling, you know, if you were to listen to me and I would tell you about growing up in South Sudan or my family, I will add in a lot of, you know, laughter and jokes and different energy that, you know, people that are telling the story cannot connect with unless they know it. So that's been a major part of, you know, our African story. You know, there's so much that you could tell about, you could tell people about Africa that they would not connect with unless they understand. You could show a picture of two kids in the street playing around with no shoes, and someone else would think of it as something negative. But in fact,
Right.
it's something positive for us. So, you know, so storytelling has become something that we need to change. It has to be a big factor in what we're trying to do and how we're trying to move forward. You could talk about what the U.S. is today. There's a lot of things that go on in the U.S. that a lot of people in Africa and the rest of the world have no idea. And that's because of the power of the PR and the storytelling. And vice versa, you could tell a lot of great things that are happening in Africa that people here don't hear about. And that's, again, goes down to the narrative and who's controlling the story. So if the story came, you know, from me talking one-on-one with somebody, it will be very different than somebody reading it. Yeah, for sure.
So thanks for that. A question that I'd love to throw to both of you, both you, Luol, and Dikembe, is that a lot of successful Africans come back to the continent to give back. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I commend you all for you know, putting back to where you came from. But it goes back to that philosophy that Africa needs trade and not aid. And the success of initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area is predicated on that principle of trade. So how do you view the continent? Is it a place where you think both of you can grow your wealth, or is it a place that you come to give back? Maybe let's start. Yeah, Dikembe, let's start with you.
Yeah, for me, it's not like Africa need aid. I am investing on my people so they can have a better life. I'm not just giving them an aid. Building the hospital is not an aid. Because when you build the institution, we're talking about a medical institution that costs more than 30-some plus $million. First, just the construction of the institution did create more than 2,000 jobs. By the time the institution was open, I have more than 420 doctors and nurses that work for me. And those doctors and nurses that work for me, you have family, you have wife and children, and so you talk about human capital that you create a wealth that's helping the children to go to school, helping the mom to have a better health, helping the grandmother. So then you're creating the institution that is doing research. We have one of the biggest pathology labs, so we have created a platform, not just we are making money, and at the same time we're investing in human capacity. So that's what we're doing. And that's the reason why I felt that I did have a success with the hospital. And in the next couple of weeks, I'm building a $3.5 million school, which I'm doing. I want to create the next generation, the people that we are going to leave behind, who are going to take over. We don't just have to go to Africa, go sell something and to make money. But what are we doing to make sure that there's a next brain in the continent? Or there's a next Dikembe Mutombo Lua Den? Those are the things that we are doing right now.
Right. No, let me throw the same question at you. And thank you. That was beautifully answered, Dikembe. Thank you very much for that. Lowell, let's hear from you.
Yeah, no, I definitely 100% agree with Dikembe. I think, when you look at Africa, you have to think of impact for investment. And what I mean by that is you can help people and you can also benefit things like what Dikembe was saying. But for example, there's things that we're doing in Uganda where we have a construction company where we're building affordable homes. Now, obviously, it's an investment for me and my company, but also we are trying to build homes where people could afford. Think of things like, for example, I would say a hut. If you think of a hut in most of African villages, you're talking about 5 walls, the smaller huts. So construction businesses, you can have a construction business and you could donate those walls easily, 30 walls, that's 5 homes in different villages. So, we have to think differently of what aid is. And I always say, you don't just keep helping someone unless there's a benefit in somehow. We all know in our families, when somebody's struggling, you help them. You want to help them one time and you don't want to keep coming back unless they're out there working and they're bringing something back to you. So that's really what aid is in Africa. I'm not saying we don't need aid, but we've had aid for how many years now? And sometimes there's some questionable aid where, we could ask, what are they really doing for that long when someone else could come in for lesser time and fix what the issue is. So there is, impact for investment in aid. And so we have to start changing the narrative. Again, I'll go back to saying, Africans have to understand that, those that are helping us are also benefiting from it. So you can help people and benefit. So, for Africans not to shy away of Africa thinking that it's just, all about aid. No, it's there's a lot in it that Africa can give, and we have to start looking into that.
Right, it's about doing good and doing well, and you talked about the aid organizations, because a lot of these organizations are actually inadvertently, because I don't think they're necessarily doing it deliberately, they're actually responsible for a lot of the negative narratives that come out of the continent. The poverty and Africa needs help. So I'd be curious about your thoughts on the role these organizations play. Dikembe, this is for you, because I know that you actually, you're an ambassador for UNICEF, you work with CARE, you work with a lot of these organizations. So what's your sort of perspective on how they tell the story of Africa? And is it something that you battle with?
I'm glad you asked me this question. I will not say that the question is a little bit sensitive. It's something that I've been struggling with. That's the reason why you see I've been so much driven with what my wife and I and my family we are doing in the continent. We believe that you don't just have to come with the vaccine and vaccinate the kids in the neighborhood and leave tomorrow and don't leave nothing because you know that they got the vaccine. But when you put a building or you put a medical center or you put a school, that can change the living condition of those people in those villages for generations to come. And so many organizations that come in the continent, they come and they make a stop in one place and they disappear. And you don't see them maybe the following year for vaccine. And those are the things that I've been arguing a lot with UNICEF and other organizations. You cannot go and raise money. You say, okay, we are raising money to build more school in the continent. But when I travel in the continent of Africa, I don't see where the school has been built. So there's a big fight. We African people need to come out, tell our own story, tell what is happening in the continent. Because there's not just UNICEF, there's a bunch of organizations in America who are taking for so many successful people. I think the work have not been done properly the way they're telling the story. And it's up to we as an African. We need to go out and tell the story that we are telling it today.
Right, right. So thanks for that. I want to bring Sir Martin back and Professor Benedict back because Martin, I left you in your very positive little spot. And somebody's actually put a question up and they said the best way to eat an elephant, the task appears impossible. How can we break it into small digestible pieces so that we can finish the whole elephant? So I want to put that question to you. You said that there is no Africa brand, and basically that there isn't a lot the continent has to offer, even though we're hearing about what our entrepreneurs, our talent is doing, our sporting legends have done in this continent. How would you fix Africa? Martin, that's for you.
You can't do it on the macro basis. I mean, every single story is a micro story. That's the way it has to be done. There was another comment by Nassim, which actually, although disagreeing, actually was agreeing with me. You have to eat the elephant in digestible pieces. And when you looked at the integration program that the two universities are talking about, they're talking about that they put together on it. But they're talking an integration.
So Martin, program. you know what? I'm gonna stop you because your Wi-Fi is really cutting in and out. So can I just hold for you and then you come back and just give your Wi-Fi a bit of time to reboot? Sure. And I'm going to ask you, Professor Benedict, so unmute. But the question for you is about funding, because when I look at the NBA, the Basketball Africa League, it's funded by the NBA. It's a US organization but where's the funding for all of this potential to happen? You've launched this fund, it's limited, it sounds like a lot, but it's actually limited. How are we going to ever do this if we don't get the funding, right?
Well, thank you very much. I think that Africa has quite a significant pool of capital to be able to fund its activities. Now, there's no continent, there's no country that has developed without finance. Just look at those who are economists can tell you what's the simple model of growth by Solow. Tell you the output is a function of labor and capital. Africa has abundant supply of labor. What Africa doesn't have is maybe capital. So we need to have capital, but we do have it. What we don't have is how to mobilize it. I think Timbo was speaking about issue of aid. You see, Africa has a long history. All the things we've been talking about, there's a lot of aid dependency. People want to wait for somebody else to come and do something for them. Whereas just looking around them, there are so many things you can convert to assets, many things you can convert to cash. Today, if you look at the foreign exchange reserves of all African countries, you're talking at something between $400 to $500 billion, depending on the time of the year, depending on the economic situation. You have pension funds that have also an equivalent of something close to another, maybe $500-600 billion, depending on what on the exchange rates you use. So you're talking of just these two. I haven't talked about the sovereign wealth funds and all, more than $1 trillion that is available. But ask yourself,
aren't they not sort of like chasing the same type of organizations, the same type of businesses? Because Africa is made up of small businesses, you know, businesses, one woman, one man ships, and they don't often get the funding because the money they require is small. So these big $1 trillion funds, $1 million funds, how are they able to break the money up so it actually gets to people who need it?
Yeah, that's why I said that the issue is hard to get is when I was going to tell you the reserves I mentioned, most of it are outside Africa, for example. They are held elsewhere. They're not in Africa.
But it's African money that's being
held outside. So it's African money elsewhere. I'm not talking about, I haven't even spoken about illicit financial flows that go out, that also run into billions of dollars have been estimated. So the important thing is not, for me, is not that we do not have funds inside Africa. What we do not have is the organizing it to do what you're saying, to be able to tackle the SMEs, to be able to address the particular problems we have. And let me tell you about the value of doing something. We at Afrexim Bank actually studied this matter. Most of our funding for our business, we used to get most of them actually from outside Africa. We used to go and issue bonds. We go to the syndicated loans market. We go and borrow money from other banks and all that. So we said to ourselves, but Africa has all this money. Why can't we tap some of them? So we gave ourselves in 2016, we said from January 2017, we would, to 2021 December, we should aim to fund our business with $10 billion of funding from Africa. Now, we created a department called the Africa Resource Mobilization Unit. So that people come there every day. The only thing they do is to go and get money from Africa, to organize it, to use to solve Africa's problem. And we created the products to do that. And I tell you, in less than 2 years, we raised just slightly under $6 billion. As we speak today, we've raised more than $14 billion. So what does that tell you? It just tells you that the money there, it wasn't easy. You had to go and convince people who are used to putting money elsewhere to put it. Then that money has helped us reduce our cost of funds. It's actually, that is why we are able to talk about putting $500 million to support the creatives, to support them in a way that will make it possible to finance the small ones through the cooperative movement I mentioned to you.
Right. So I'm going to bring in Vanya and Adama, who've been sitting very patiently. Just in terms, because we didn't really talk about the financing of your businesses. And I think, Professor Benedict, you make a good point about the fact that there is a lot of money out there somewhere. But Vanya and then Adama, I just want to hear from you. how you raise funding. I know, actually, I do know, Vanya, you had a very good loan. And then Adama, we didn't talk about it. So Vanya, just tell us quickly, how did you raise funding? And did you need a lot? And do you need more? And are people coming to you to offer you funding because you've got a business?
No. Well, how did I start it? I started my business with my savings. This is a business that required a lot of capital intensive.
Imagine it's diamonds.
Yes, risks are higher. When I first started, I thought I was going to buy all my materials on the continent. I think I actually raised this with the Professor Orama. And so I started with very small, with my own savings. And then I convinced one of the suppliers I knew while working for the companies to lend me some diamonds. He lent me these diamonds, so I was able to use those diamonds, make jewelry, and sell it to my clients. Whenever I sold a piece, I would go straight back and pay my workshop and my supplier. One thing of being an African business, a Black woman entering this business, when I started, I was the only one. So I wanted to make sure I have a clean path. I do business properly, because then my successors won't have the same problem to prove themselves first. So then in 2015, one of my clients said, Vanya, listen, I like what you do. My wife loves your jewelry. What do you need to grow? And I said, capital, finance, because no one will finance me. Anyway, he lent me a small amount of money that was enabled me to have the company I have today. But I've been very frugal. I've been reinvesting everything. I never pay dividend. I have very humble salary, but I want to have a brand that tell African stories to inspire people, because these natural resources exist in our backyard. And yet I didn't know what the wealth and employment they produce outside the continent. So every little person
I was just going to ask you, sorry, you finish your thoughts and I'll say.
Yeah, so basically I've been trying to fundraise for the last 4 years, and it's hard. I had some people who wanted to offer investments into my company, but again, I want to make sure that the sources of my investments are very clean, transparent, overboard, because then, when I first started, she's a daughter of someone. I said, no, I'm not a daughter of anything. I'm building this. So trying to fundraise has been hard, but I have a product, and I have a collateral, and trying to get those very, squeaky clean, as we call it, over the board institutions.
Well, let me just say here that we've got lots of clean sources of money on the continent, and you're looking at one of them. Professor Benedict, I'm sure you guys can have a conversation afterwards. But Adama, let me come to you, because what we're trying to figure out is, what did it take? What kind of funding did it take for you to start? And then what do you need to scale? Because we want more Vanyas, more Adamas. So Adama, tell me about how you raise funding for your business.
Okay, at that time, hi Loa, hi Dikembe, bonjour, ça fait plaisir de vous voir. And yeah, I started, it was unusual. I saw a magazine, a French magazine, who put me on a cover without my permission. So with that money, I started my business. That's really how I started my business. And ever since, I never had a loan. And for Sir Martin, I live in the continent. I live in Dakar. I happen to be now here because my husband is now here, but I live in Dakar. I went back there. And I started businesses, like we started the channel, the TV channel that worked really well. That business helped the other business. That's how I run my businesses. The TV helping the event helping the agency. That's how, because no bank would let me and give me money. Even now,
to this day, have you tried?
It's just amazing how I don't know how just so Monsieur Orama can maybe help. I don't know why people just can trust fashion and art in Africa. I think there's sport people are so lucky because they bring their fame, they bring their energy, and everything is like kind of consolidate already, and it's so hard for fashion people, and Vanya won't let me lie, to just find little. We have this project now, you know, like for these 2 past year, I opened a series of store called Sargal concept store, where you can find African designer. We open in 3 in Paris, and we're opening Berlin, we're in Morocco and stuff. But still, and we have in this factory, this artisanal factory that we all have said we just want land. And even if in my Senegal, I'm relatively famous, but still, it's just so hard. Like sometimes it's just like, I don't get it. And the only way I get money sometimes is just by people, like friends, like Lauren. Like I have Drogba. Drogba is not here, but it helped me. It helps.
Right.
Like 6 years ago, we helped when 7 years ago when we launched the Black Fashion weeks and in Brazil and stuff. It thought that it was really good. So that's how we're getting money. People who just support, but we never really, like, I don't know, can you just, Professor, answer why we not, even if my businesses are really good, and I've been here for 18 years and we have numbers, and it's just, when I go to bank, they don't care. And sometimes what they ask me, I can't afford to have, because even if I have all these businesses, they're small businesses. So how can you cut the big part of the elephant and give us our part? And just that I'm a creative, I can't answer. And I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a creative entrepreneur, because I do try to, I organize events to make money. I do fashion events, we having the TV, but it's so hard. Sometimes I just like, oh, how can we just move forward, and how can these people can help us? Because when we started, I remember in Dakar 18 years ago, I had to do everything on my own. There were no fashion weeks. We created a fashion week. We created a TV channel, like in 46 countries in Africa. We created agency. We created magazine, and now we want a factory, and now we have these shops. But still, the struggle is still the same.
Right. As my teenage daughter would say, the struggle is real.
It is
so I'm
real.
Sure it is.
It's real. People love to come to the fashion show, but nobody want to invest.
Wants to buy, yeah. So we're nearly at time, but I do want to bring Sir Martin back. I see you back on the line to sort of finish what you started. Are you there? Are you back? Because I just want to hear from you. Just
can you hear me? Can you hear me, Moki?
I can now. I can. I just wanted you to finish that thought about what can we do.
So everything. Yeah, every word, and what we just heard from and from Vanya on the difficulties.
So Martin, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? No good?
Yeah, okay, let's give you one last try, and let's see, because you're going in and out, so give it another go.
Okay, all right. Well, let's give it a go from Dharma and Vanya, Andy from the professor, and can be. Okay. And as I think saying, it has a micro basis, not on a macro basis.
Right.
Too long, it will be too long to wait for governments to get together with common trends around currency, around government structure, common army, what it happens to be. What happens at the grassroots level, venture capital and private equity at the level together. The stories that you've heard just now are so motivating, so full of talent. It has to be done at an individual level.
Oh, so Martin, I'm going to have to stop you because you are cutting. You're cutting quite badly, so we can't hear you.
Okay.
But I don't know. Where in the world are you?
Can I respond to Adama?
Sorry?
Can I respond to Adama?
Yes, okay, please respond and then well, I'll wrap up. So Professor, off you go.
No, thank you, Adama. Thanks for raising those issues you have. I'm actually surprised that you have not approached us. Granted, we only recently launched our Creative Africa strategy, but even before then, we've been financing companies of the type you described. But right we launched it just before the COVID, so things are not fully picked up the way we thought they would. But please send us your whatever you think we could do to support in terms of investments. But I also wanted you to note, to take off from where Martins left it. You see, one of the things that will make us grow the business for the creative industry in Africa is the African trade in it, through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. So what we've done was to launch a Pan-African payment and settlement platform that will make it easier for people to pay for intra-regional trade in goods and services in their local currencies. So what that does now is that you, somebody in Zambia can actually buy your product and pay in Zambia kwacha. So he doesn't have to worry about the foreign currency and things like that. We believe that this will immediately boost demand within the African continent. Please, you probably have our contact. If you don't have, if you go to the website, you will get the information and we will be able to respond. If we don't respond to you the way you want, please, I'm available. You can contact me directly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So I hope the Boma Festival will get a cut of that investment as the introducer of that deal. We can take that one offline. But look, we've come to the end, and I really want to thank everybody for joining us. So Adama, Vanya, Dikembe, thank you. You look great for so early in the morning, so I've got to give you that. Luol, thank you also for joining us. Sir Martin, sorry about your Wi-Fi. And actually, Vanya sent a little note saying she really wants to hear what you want to say. So maybe there's a place and a time for us to pick up this conversation at another time. And of course, Prof. Benedict Orama, thank you all for your time. My name is Moki Makura. It's been an absolute honor to be with you today. And remember, let us not let the hunters tell our stories for us.